Shana Tova. Can everyone hear me in the back? Over the summer, I found the hope I didn't know I was missing. It all started when I took a 4-year-old girl to the mikveh. I had worked with her parents for months leading up to the day when I had the honor to officiate at her conversion. The final steps were to gather the family, convene a Beit Din, and for her to immerse in the mikveh, the ritual bath affirming her identity as a Jew. After she jumped in, after she jumped in, she splashed through the top of the water and barely even took a breath before she exclaimed her very first words as a Jew. "This is so fun." The joy of this 4-year-old reminded me of what I already knew. This is so fun. I love leading families through life cycle moments. However hard the past year has been, and it has been hard, in that mikveh, I looked up and I thanked God for days like this. That boisterous, happy morning left me feeling a kind of calm optimism, like I could expect more happy mornings to come, like there would come a time, God willing soon, when the heavy grief and stress of this past year will finally lift. In that moment, I wondered to myself, is this what hope feels like? It took me a pause to recognize what I was feeling, because it had been a while. And I know I'm not alone. I have had so many conversations with people about waking up in the middle of the night in a cold sweat about the state of our world. Are we worried about democracy under threat, anti-Semitism, a new strain of COVID, war in Israel? That last one, a worry and a reality that has reached new and frightening heights this past week. We all have things that make us anxious and, in the extreme, even hopeless. But joy comes in the morning, the book of Psalms reassures us. Though we may weep at night, that weeping may endure for a day or a month or a year. Joy does come in the morning, but we know as Jews that joy does not just come. We have to wake up and make it come. This joy, this hope, is more than an abstract feeling that we stumble upon by luck or coincidence. It is not an emotion that we just have or a rosy outlook that we sometimes lose, or a perspective that anyone can take away from us. Rather, hope is active and intentional. Hope is hard work, and it's serious. It is not just an experience. Hope is a choice. It is not just a noun. Hope. Hope is a verb. former First Lady Michelle Obama reminded us in her speech at the end of the summer, hope is making a comeback. As she pushed us to each do our part, does anyone remember the refrain which she repeated over and over? I hear it all. I hear you. Do remember. Do something. Do something. As I listened to her words late that night in front of my glowing TV screen, I could feel the edges of my mouth lift up into a smile. And I could feel myself exhale in relief. This past year has been so painful and tragic. I have felt my own shades of despair, and I also know that I'm not alone in that. But I also learned this year how to hope like never before in my lifetime. It felt like Michelle Obama had been reading my mind and my heart, and maybe listening into my phone calls. I actually had just had a catch-up call with my 90-year-old friend, Ruthie, a few days earlier, and we had talked about how much we need hope. I will tell you more about that conversation a bit later, but the night that I heard that speech, I knew. Do something is what we need for this Jewish New Year. Do something is how we activate our hope. Do something is how the Jewish people has survived the millennia, and it is how we will survive the next 1,000 years. I am reminded of this every Friday night in the Lecha Dodi prayer, as we call out from a long ago despair over the destruction of Jerusalem. We sing, Hitorari, Hitorari, wake up, Hit na'ari me'afar kumi, shake it off, get up from the ashes. This prayer's author is telling us to see beyond the immediate calamity and to take action, to create hope for ourselves. How beautiful that sometimes I really can't get enough of Lecha Dodi. It is so beautiful that every Friday night we build Shabbat from the hopelessness and brokenness that we might have felt from the night before, the week before. Lecha Dodi wakes us up to hope and reminds us to do something. I am so proud that our Jewish stories are filled with people who take action, because there is nothing more hopeful than trying. Even especially if we don't know the outcome, we have no assurance, the odds are against us, we try. That is who we are. When I need to remember that, I reach for the story of Yocheved, Moses' mother. Under Pharaoh's orders to throw every baby boy into the Nile, she has no realistic chance to save hers. Still, she hides him for 3 months until she can no longer. And she tries again. She takes a wicker basket and carefully seals it with pitch. She places Moses among the reeds on the bank of the loud and forceful Nile River. she has no certainty that her basket will hold up. But we know it does. We know that Moses lives to be lifted out of that Nile, and he grows up to lead the Israelites out of Egypt. I like to think that at the end of his life, Moses' life, that he could still feel his mother's hands making that tiny basket and placing him in the water defiantly 120 years before. In our times now, a modern day Yocheved tried to save her son too. Hirsch Goldberg Poland was held hostage in Gaza for 11 months before he was executed by Hamas. His birthday was actually yesterday. Every day he was missing, his parents tried to save him. Rachel and John built their basket with courageous words and relentless advocacy, never allowing the world to forget how many days they had been waiting. The number always handwritten in Sharpie marker across their bodies. They gave powerful personal interviews whenever they could. John shared last spring, "We get up every morning, and the key for us is that we do. Every day we make the decision that we're not going to just stay in bed. We're going to get out of bed and we're going to go and we're going to take action." Rachel said, in the beginning we would go to sleep and we felt completely defeated and we would say we failed. He's not home. They're not home. We failed. And we're working so hard, so it's this really terrible feeling of, oh my gosh, we just worked 21 hours straight, and we failed. Then Rachel describes that she met this woman. I met her, and she said, "We need to change our own internal narrative. When you get into bed at night, you have to ask, did I do every single thing that I could do to try to save him and them? And if the answer is yes, then you don't have to beat yourself up that they're not home yet, because you're building something." Despite their profound loss, Rachel and John continue to hope for the remaining hostages. They are modern models of active hope. And we learn from them that to hope means to try. We have to make a kind of basket too, like Yocheved from the Torah, even when we aren't sure if it will be successful. We learn again, to hope is to try. Another way that we actively hope is through tshuva, through repair, through return, making amends in our everyday relationships, in our everyday lives. I sometimes hesitate to initiate those hard conversations, like telling someone they've hurt me. But my relationships are stronger when I make a conscious choice to pull people closer for tshuva. And that pull is deeply, deeply hopeful. It means that I believe the relationship is worth the work. In the Torah, Joseph models this kind of hope with his brothers. And we know they have a fraught and complicated relationship, to say the least. These are the same brothers who, in their youth, threw Joseph in a pit, considered killing him, and eventually also sold him into slavery. Many years and many plot twists later, Joseph is now living a new life in Egypt as Pharaoh's advisor. During a famine, the brothers come to Egypt asking for food, asking for help. And they don't at first recognize their brother, but he knows them. And he stalls at first, maybe understandable. He's not sure what to do when he sees them, or maybe he's already in despair over any chance at reconciliation, or maybe he's not sure if they're worth the work. But we can feel the tension build as a kernel of hope grows within him. And he eventually takes action. "I am Joseph," he utters out loud from a puddle of tears, finally revealing who he is. He leans in closer, saying, "Draw near to me." And when they do come close, he says again, "I am your brother Joseph, the one you sold to Egypt." In this most tense moment, rather than pulling away, he pulls closer instead. He invites his brothers in. "Draw near to me." And maybe the hardest part, he reminds them of what they did and gives them the chance to make amends. Joseph activates his hope when he chooses to return to his deeply strained relationships. He risks showing his emotions. He invites intimacy. He wants to be known. Like Joseph, we actively hope in our relationships by doing tshuva, which requires that we have to also believe that repair is possible. Otherwise, they're just words. They're just checking boxes, unless we actually have the hope that it could lead to repair. To do something in this context is to say, "Draw near to me. Come close. Let's make this better." To hope is to try, with the tenacity of a parent building a life-saving basket. To hope is to lean into tshuva with the vulnerability and the courage of Joseph. And I want to offer one more specific and tangible way for us to hope actively. As we are in an election season, one of the most simple and straightforward ways to hope actively for the future is to vote. Back to my friend Ruthie, who I mentioned her in the beginning. This amazing 90-year-old is the epitome of a Jewish grandmother crossed with a civil rights activist. When I asked her how she stays hopeful into her 10th decade, she blew me away with her trademark clear-sightedness. She didn't even hesitate. She said, "We must get out the vote. That is how we hope for the future. Hope is talking to people, knocking on doors, driving people to the polls. For the sake of my children and grandchildren, she said, you can't not vote. When you vote, your hope, the noun, becomes hope, the verb. Ruthie, giving voice to everyone's Jewish grandmother, taught me that to vote is an act of hope. To vote is to show up and to care enough to do something. To vote is to believe that our votes matter, even if it's in a way that we don't see or understand right away, even if we don't have any certainty about the outcome. And to vote is to pray. A vote is the most non-denominational of prayers, a private kind of petition for a better future. Senator and Reverend Raphael Warnock has often said, a vote is a kind of prayer for the world we desire for ourselves and our children. The Mishnah teaches in Pirkei Avot, do not separate yourself from the community. Al tifrosh min hatzibur. So to anyone who might be frustrated with the red-blue divide in our country, to college students who are eligible to vote for the first time, and really to any of us for whatever reason who might need to hear this, do not say in complacency, I don't need to vote, it won't make a difference, other people will vote for my interests, or I will sit this one out in protest. Rather, we must join the community to choose our laws and our leaders who represent our vision and our direction. When we get out the vote, we are ensuring that everyone has access and motivation to be counted too. And when we do that, we are hoping. When we apply our Jewish values to stand up as American citizens, we are hoping. Hope is so much more than an abstract, elusive emotion that we sometimes feel, sometimes don't. Hope is serious, active work. We grow and protect this hope by changing our thinking from hope, a noun passive, to hope, a verb that's active. Our tradition teaches us that to hope is to try, to build a basket like Yocheved, to speak to the world like Hirsch's parents. How will you try this year? To hope is to draw others near for the chance of tshuva, like Joseph. Whom will you draw near? And to hope is to vote, to show up and speak up, like my friend Ruthie. Will you vote and get out the vote? We have to do something. Hitorari, hitorari. Wake up, wake up. Shake it off. Get up from the ashes and hope. Shana tova umetuka. May our new year be good and